Hello, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. Yeah, excited to chat. We've got a really good panel today. UX is cool. I agree with you that when you're talking about something like becoming product led, you really need lots of people across the organization. It can't just be something that's done by one team like product. Um, and that's often the case that people try and do that. So we've got a very cool cross-functional, lots of different representation on the panel today. So I will just go down. I'll go down the list on the slide here. So we got Panos, who's a senior product manager from Philips. Panos, hello. We have Robbie, who's the head of growth at Fluidity. We have Snezjana, who's a product director at Oxygen, and Jose, who's a design lead at ThoughtWorks. So thank you all for being here. Jose, you have your very festive, if you're American, I would say, oh, you're getting ready for Thanksgiving with your festive Thanksgiving flannel on. So thanks for doing that. But
I'm very close to the US culture for sure. Yeah. So
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for being here. I'm really, really excited to chat. I think it's awesome to do because it really is kind of rare. You get different people from all over the organization to talk about one topic like this, and you all have different points of view and different ideas to share. So that's what we're going to get into today. I'm going to tee it up a little bit. I mean, I think the purpose of today, so I'm Marcus Andrews, I'm director of product marketing at Pendo. And the purpose of today is to really talk less about why becoming a product-led organization matters and is important, and talk more about unpacking the things that product-led companies do differently, or that you do at your role when you're thinking about becoming product-led in your product-led journey. Why this is important, I will start there though, is that the way people are changing, the world is changing, and especially the way that people buy new products and software products, really anything, is dramatically different than any time it's been before in the world. I mean, I think what's going on with people is that people expect very little friction in the things that they buy and the tools that they buy, their buying experience. They expect great design, great UX, people understand what good is and they expect it. People have less of a desire to talk to humans, whether that's to get support or to upgrade or to buy. And in general, I think people are a lot smarter and a lot more technically savvy than they've ever been. And all this kind of coming together is forcing companies to adapt and change and do things differently. So you see a lot of companies hiring product teams, investing in product, investing in user research, UX, product design to build better customer experiences. You see companies rolling out product-led growth and in-app support to deliver that experience that people want. And you see companies really changing the way they market and the way that they sell, and introducing free products and doing all of these things. The companies that nail this and really get this right and are doing a great job of it are at Pendo, what we call product-led organizations. Since you saw that book that the UXDX team was talking about earlier that Todd, our CEO, wrote, is really all about that. Companies like Zoom and Slack and Zendesk and Atlassian, they've really transformed their business around their product. And it's created this really, really good customer experience. So I think a lot of people believe in this. A lot of people probably watching our panel, Pendo, we're all kind of going through this transformation, trying to get better at becoming a product-led company. Pendo's definitely doing it, even though we evangelize for it. We only introduced a free product, I think, in the last year, we've gone all in on it. So everybody's sort of in pieces of this journey, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, so that you can learn from these people, and we're going to have lots of time. So we're going to have a panel discussion, and then I think we'll have some time to open it up to the audience too. You can put stuff in the chat and we will check it out and we will answer it. But why don't we start there? And Jose, because you are so festive and ready for this panel, why don't we start with you? What does it mean to be product-led? What does that mean to you? When you think about being product-led, how do you define it? What's your answer to what that means?
Yeah, to me, it definitely means three things, right? The first is that everybody on the team understand what is the purpose of the product that we are trying to build, right? And that goes back to a very basic question, but a very important one, right? Which is basically, how is our product improving the life of the people that are using this product, right? So it seems like a very basic question, but it's the one that we go back to refer to in order to understand the value that we are bringing through our product. So that's the first one. The second, I think through a product-led approach, what we're trying to do is to creating a system of check and balances between what the business thinks is important, what we hear from our users, and then also what is feasible from a technical approach, right? We have all to be on the same page and together discussing those things in order to understand what is the thing that brings the maximum value with the lower effort. So we don't spend an entire year of planning and then we just try to release something, right? So that's super important. This also comes with another layer, which is trying to shift the mindset of our teams into thinking more critically. And that goes back again to a very basic question, right? Is what we're trying to build has been solved with a digital product, or actually what we need to do is design a service, or maybe it's a mix of both, or actually what we're asked to do is to drive user behavioral change, right? And if so, it's a digital product, the best solution for that. So again, those are questions that we go back and we use over and over. And finally, I think it's also very important. We try to think about our product as the living prototype. What do I mean with that? That the product that we release is the common destination for our stakeholders, for our users, and for our technical teams to understand how the product works, right? This is super important because if we think that our product is a living prototype, then we can start doing little testings around in the actual experience. So this is not about changing everything at once, but doing those incremental changes that we can do right on the product that we release and see the meaningful change that has created in our users. So these three things are product like to.
Great advice. And you look after, tell us quickly what you look after at ThoughtWorks. You're the leading design, right? Or tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, basically what I'm doing at ThoughtWorks right now, it's, I mean, ThoughtWorks is a technical consultancy for those who doesn't know. So actually ThoughtWorks is my client as well, right? I'm working inside of the organization to drive cultural change. We're trying to bring back the culture of learning at the center of organization because we are scaling a lot and somehow that culture has been diluted over the years. And we're going to be scaling up to 30,000 employees in such a short amount of time that we need to bring back this culture, right? So what we're doing is that, of course, we are using digital products to bring us together into that approach. But at the same time, we were not that conscious, but we were actually building an entire service that connects together growth, performance, learning, and actually staffing right now. Because as a consultancy, we staff people in projects, right? So all of that is kind of like a service that we are designing, but of course with a digital experience at the core. So we work very close with the SMEs of the different disciplines at ThoughtWorks. You name it, like finance, head of people, recruitment, etc.
Awesome. Cool. Very, very interesting take and good examples. Panos, you're in product, right? So like, what does it mean to you? We're kind of sticking in the same universe, but what does being product led mean to you? And maybe why is it important? What's the benefit of it?
Yeah, I had similar points with Jose, so I will steer a bit, maybe complement. To me, it's really a lot on big data driven as well, right? So if you don't measure it, you don't love it, some people say. So you really have to have your evidence, your metrics, and iterate on this, like see how things are going. To like, is the new features I'm releasing being adapted? Do they bring more traffic? Do they contribute towards our vision, our mission? If yes, good. Maybe we do more of this, right? If no, fine as well. We kill this feature, we iterate, and we keep going. So that's one thing for me. Like really know your metrics and have your data in place. Other thing I have in mind, like for product-driven companies, it's a lot on engaging on continuous discovery. And what will that mean for me is to really be in touch with your customer. Like never drop the ball on this game. Like weekly or I don't know, like as often as it's possible for your team, have some discovery sessions with the customer, right? And ask like on examples, like how would you use this like how can I best say it, like guide your customers on some use cases you're interested in building, and then the customer will very well set examples for you and tell you what can be useful or not on solutions you're thinking of. And this will be for me like the two biggest things, actually, data and customer interaction, because with these two in mind, you can be quite successful, actually.
Absolutely. Snezana, why don't we jump over to you? What do you do? Tell us a little bit about what you do, and then, maybe what product-led or what being product-led means to you, how you're putting it to use.
Yeah, so I'm product director at Oxygen, and we are essentially a consumer starting. Marcus, what you mentioned at the beginning, this generation is really the one that is really tech savvy, digital native. They grew up with their phones, and we are designing the product for them. So there's no patience in terms of waiting for, to understand what the value of the product. They make a decision in like 10 seconds about the product when they have it in their hands, in the phone. So that's like additional trend to like really important one. Why we are today where we are, and why like product-led model is really successful for the companies. So to me, like product-led, really, I always go back to the definition because it's really big topic. So sometimes you need to kind of go back to the essentials. And for me, it's essentially go-to-market strategy that where like your product is in the center, and like you're leveraging your product for the acquisition, activation, retention, and expansion of your business. So with that said, this like results with all your teams throughout the organization aligning around product and leveraging that product for to create the seamless customer experience, but also to kind of to achieve their own outcomes, right, as a teams. So as a result of that, you kind of end up with putting the user in the driver's seat. You give them freemium or free trial to test it out. You kind of, your marketing is using the product as a lead magnet, let's say, so to generate leaders. So your sales team is using them, kind of to qualify the prospect. So because the people are coming in, and you're basically essentially looking at wider top of the funnel. You get more people in, they try on their own, and then you have somebody who's more interested about the product, right, than before. So it's I guess it's a big shift, big change, and there's a lot of responsibility on the product, because I would say the product is in the center.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, you describe it well too, because when we were talking earlier, it's not, I do think most businesses can benefit from taking a product-led approach. But if you have an audience that, like you, maybe is Gen Z, it's like very even more advanced and sophisticated with technology or their expectations and other audiences. It's like there's really no other option. Is there specific places where you think you've got gained a competitive advantage? Like, has this approach helped you? Like, is there ways you clearly benefited from doing this?
So from the start, we kind of enabled them to try the product. So we didn't ask even for the sign up or anything else for any data. We just said, okay, there you go. It's your decision. So of course you need to be really, really careful with that. But essentially that was our go-to strategy for the market. Put them in the driver's seat, really try to understand what they are trying to get out of the product, what is the value of the product that we are giving them back, and learn on that, and update the product as we go.
Now, was that hard internally? Was that a tough decision to make? Did you have to fight any battles or have discussions about
So internally, really no. So we kind of started, because we are a startup, like 2 years old. So we started like that. We understood the Gen Zs are very pragmatic. They understand the financials. They know how to kind of how to measure time versus value in their own life. So we understood the customer really well and what they're expecting, and then we just basically designed from there. We are a small team, so we have very limited resources, and we said, like, virality is our way to go. We need to achieve it, to survive.
Yes.
And that's, like, we didn't have like a big sales team or a big marketing budget, so everything is limited. So you really want those loops, growth loops in, and we were just focusing how to get there, how to put it in front of customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of startups and younger companies are taking that same approach, because it's almost more risky to invest in big sales and marketing machine when that is a risk. And it's like, maybe it feels risky doing something like that, where you're giving people access for free and you're requesting less data up front. But it's kind of less risky in a way too, because you're not spending so much money on a big sales and marketing machine. But all right, Robbie, let's tell us a little bit about what you do and what ProductLed means to you, maybe how you're putting it to use at Fluidity.
Yeah, so I'm the head of growth at Fluidly, which kind of gives me the slightly different take, which is growth is often about product. Traditionally, maybe just to give like a brief definition, is often more about creating that feature that has value, and then growth is about driving users towards that and making sure they can experience the actual value. Of course, everyone in a startup or a tech company should be focused on growth, but that's kind of a distinction that's hopefully useful. And I thought it was interesting talking about, I think that was a great definition of what product-led is. I guess it's also useful to think about what it is not. I think you've touched on that a little bit, Marcus, which is it's not paid marketing, that kind of thing, and it's not having a big sales team. And I think maybe more controversially, it's binning the funnel, right? So the acquisition, activation, retention, revenue, referral, the R model, it's focusing instead on loops, which was also just mentioned. So thinking about your user, how they get value from the product, how they might share or invite others to then experience that value, which then can create kind of the mecca of what we're all trying to create, which is organic growth rather than the stuff that we have to pay for. And so like the classic breakout for that might be like Teams during the pandemic, and obviously Slack before it, which is still like a B2B product, but it's driving involvement from other users. And that's how I think about kind of product-led growth, which is how can you create that user value sharing loop that's actually going to drive really organic growth. And that's how we think about it Fluidly, where we provide cash flow management software for accountants and SMEs. And a lot of this is about providing a really delightful, interesting experience for our accountants that drives conversations with their clients. That means they share it both with their clients and also with their colleagues as well. And that's what we spend a lot of time focusing on. And it's really hard as well, is worth noting in a time-constrained world. I think the only final thing I might add quickly, and you might have more questions, is also that this is not for everyone, right, around product-led growth. I used to work at Humu, another startup, and that was focused on enterprise sales. And actually, that was the right strategy for that product. And you still have to have all these product aspects and be thinking carefully about product, but you want a big sales team. And so you have to combine these. And I guess one of the stories I might end on is actually TikTok, maybe another Zoomer or Gen Z kind of product as well, which is, you might think of TikTok as a product-led model, but actually kind of somewhat counterintuitively, it's also a paid model. The way they drove a lot of their early network effects, a lot of their users is actually from a huge marketing spend targeted at where Gen Z kind of hangs out on the internet. And so I think this is what you should think about as product teams, which is how do you mold the product-led with the other kind of tools in your arsenal as well.
Yeah, it's a great point to end on. I think it's not either or necessarily, but I think there's a lot of companies that can benefit from just this change in thinking, because you do want to shift and match how people buy and what they expect. But yes, you can get things become very powerful if you are able to combine the two. Like, let's say you have a really, you have an enterprise product that requires like an enterprise sales motion, but you also have a free version that can get people caught up and up to speed and then help the sales team. So like and that's what Slack's model is, right? Like where it's like everybody is using Slack for free probably at some point, but they have sales teams, of course, because they sell massive deals to big companies, right? So like you do want people to work on that. And there's some really, really good things that happen with that. Why don't we stay with you for a second? Tell us, I'm curious about some of the challenges you've had. So that you can take that wherever you want, anything that, that is particularly hard about product-led growth for you, but also I'm curious about how you work with product, right? Like what are some of the things you do like cross-functionally? I don't know if you have any examples of challenges there, but one thing with growth teams, I think it's tough because you do have to work with product and get product to build growth loops for you and stuff, right? Like how does that happen?
Yeah. I guess maybe we'll start there. And I think so there's firstly, I guess the biggest challenge, what is really hard, and I think we've touched on it already, which is that absolute laser focus on being customer and user centric is actually really hard. I don't think many people admit it. Like you see in every enterprise marketing these days, they're all customer first, customer centric. It's all about the customer, but actually it's very easy to ship a product and then basically admire it yourself internally and kind of forget to go look at, are the users actually enjoying it? Do they like it? And is it starting to create some of those loops? And definitely in my experience, where that is one of the biggest challenges around this area. So definitely we're often shipping products, we're speaking to users, but then really being disciplined about going back and understanding, was this just like a tactical increase because there was a novelty feature, or is it something that's actually sustainable and driving true value and some kind of loop as well? And so we spend a lot of time making sure we have the systems in place to be like, okay, are we actually going back and understanding what's happening with our customers? Was this a small spike or is it actually a sustainable increase? And then I think on the second point, cross-functional collaboration, that's actually going to be my second biggest, hardest things, because I think it is one of those big, difficult things. I used to be a management consultant back in the day before going into product and growth. And they're often like the management consultant has control of the full project, right? Basically, you produce the slides, you speak to the client, you do everything. That is totally different in technology in general and also in growth and product, which is it's totally cross-functional. And I think that is what product-led to me also means. It means you have a team, for instance, in our case, it has marketing on it, it has designers on it, it has devs and engineers on it, and it's actually moving together that actually produces like the gains. But that can be hard. So sometimes growth comes in, we change a few things and we do it as an experiment, and then we might accidentally mess things up as well as a result in the actual core app or the core product experience. So you do have to have like a lot of, you have to have some like, SLAs with the rest of the team. So one of the SLAs we have is, if we break it, we fix it in growth as an example. But then also we have different SLAs with our design team as well. So for instance, we might say, actually, we need faster turnarounds because we're trying to experiment a bit more and understand what's going on with users than like a classic feature. So when growth comes to you with a request, we actually have a different kind of feedback cycle. So it's important you have to be cross-functional, collaborative, they're the core skill set, but also think about what you're trying to do. And maybe you have to put in kind of different team norms or SLAs that sit around it.
Yeah, great points. Great points. I think I 100% agree that like, if you're going to go product led, you have to be able to be good at collaborating. Like you're very, very right. Like because that is also hard. Collaboration is tough. It's much easier to sit in your silo and do your own thing, right? But if you're going to go product led, you really do have to have all your teams working together. And that's like, a product marketing manager, director of product marketing, we're just a very cross-functional role. It's like what we're designed to do. And most product managers are too. And then also your point on being customer focused, easier said than done. Jose, why don't we go back to you? You talked a little bit about the customer. How do you get customer feedback? How do you stay in touch with the customer in design? Is this something that you have systems to do? Are you just talking to people? Like, how do you approach it?
Yeah, I mean, our customers, so to speak, are the employees in the organization, right? Which is kind of like a bigger problem because you cannot like live and breathe those day-to-day challenges. So I have to say upfront that working for your organization, you have to be super aware of the own biases that you bring to the table, right? Because you are ingrained in the organization. But that also gives you a nice edge because you are exposed to conversations between stakeholders and between employees that otherwise you might not be able to, right? Again, ThoughtWorks is a consultancy, so chances are that we are sent to clients, and clients, they just share partial information with us when we try to solve their challenges, but I'm ingrained in the organization. So the way for me to approach the challenges is by, of course, approaching my fellow thought workers and going there and have interviews, but also observing, right? Something that is harder nowadays because we are all working in remote settings. So there's less information that we are getting from the day-to-day interaction. So that's also something that we have to consider in product design today, that we are missing part of this observation, this way for us to emerge issues by just observing the day-to-day interactions, right? That's something that we are losing. So, but with that said, I try to run interviews, and when I say users, actually our users are not just the employees, but also the operational employees. So I'm talking about people who work in admin, in H&R, in global mobility. All those are users of our systems as well. And if we want to incorporate or to enhance the culture of feedback in the organization, then we have to involve everybody in the organization, right? Even the 5% who work in the operational side. So interviews, talking to stakeholders. And then I think, which is also one of the challenges, is to make sure that we can find time to bring some of those representatives together on the same space to discuss some of these issues, some of these findings, and to co-create the solution, right? So one of the challenges in products is definitely to carve out that time. Stakeholders are super busy. Our employees are super busy as well because they are supposed to be 100% consulting for our clients. So carving out that time to sit together and listen to each other in order to break the silos, to understand the challenges, to create that shared understanding is something that I like to do, right? So there's two things that always I try to do. One is having a shared understanding about the issues. And for that, we have to bring the voices of the different users or employees in the organization. And the other is having universal alignment. And that's more for the product team, right? And with the stakeholders. What is the thing that we're going to be starting to do, right? Because people have plans. Everybody thinks something different about where to start first. Okay, how can we get them to that universal alignment into this is the place that we have to start first, right? There's no only way but discussing and let it sit and discussing again and try to consent to a potential approach, right? So this is not about voting what is the best way to start. It's more about consenting, understanding why some people are saying that this is the best way to go. Let's start there. Let us start there, and then let's learn from that, right? So that's how you get people into consenting, rather than just misaligning on something, on being mad because my solution is not the one that is going to be driving first. Right?
Yeah, that's good. There's a lot in there. I mean, I think knowing your own biases and building a culture of feedback, I think are two really, really important points. Taking the time to get everybody in the same room. And then also, like you said, you know, a lot of the times you have meetings and people, I think, are too ready to like jump into solutions or try to like take action out of them. But sometimes you just have to have the conversation and then let it digest and have people think about it and then have the conversation again and then have it again. And like eventually you're going to get there. It takes more time that way. But I think if you're always sort of talking about things that, you know, maybe you're a few years out or like big issues that don't have an easy solution, you can solve them that way by talking about them. So love that point. Panos, how about collaboration? You're in product management, right? Like imagine it's a pretty cross-functional role. Like how do you what happens when you're collaborating well across different teams? What happens when things aren't going as expected? Like help us unpack that one a little bit.
Yeah. So you want a happy scenario, right?
You give them both to us, you know, like, I mean, hey, if you want to share, like what happens when things don't go well in collaboration? Why does it happen that way? What happens when it is working? I mean, I think everybody experiences both sides of that coin, right? So, I don't know.
Yeah, no, very good question. I believe in general, like well, except if there is some very dysfunctional organization, in most cases, everyone works for the same team, right? Same goals, same bonuses, same product. So everyone wants to collaborate, right? So in essence, if the processes and the mindsets are right in the right way, then things can go fast. I believe that's what the main differentiation is there to me. Like your time to market, like when everything runs like a really like well set it up machine, let's say, you can really see like that as well. Happiness in the team is higher. People can appreciate each other's thoughts better. There is less friction because everyone knows like the process, and the process can be whatever works for the team. It's like there is not a silver bullet, like as Jose says, right? It's kind of a consent, like what works for us, what will make the best and most valuable outcome for our team. Yeah, like of course you can use like Scrum frameworks or any agile frameworks you want. Still, like as well as was mentioned before in the conversation, it's all about changing habits too, right? Or as Snezlana was saying, if you're maybe a new company, you don't have much of legacy, you can hit the ground running with some like kind of digital native. But if you're coming from like backgrounds when like your company is 150 years old or so, then there is some history and different ways of working there, and that might be things that will slow you down. But yeah, more to your point, and to conclude my answer, I do believe that the magic happens when the team is aligned on how things are expected to work, and then you will see it on your time to market actually.
Could I suggest a little hack? I think that like product-led organizations normally will use. So this is probably not a surprise to most people, but it does improve your productivity and the collaboration significantly, which is most people run postmortems or retrospectives after projects where they go, oh, wow, like why did all those things go wrong? And the slight hack is pre-mortem. So before the project gets underway, you get everyone who's going to be involved and touched on the project, customer success, design, all kinds of stakeholders in the one room, and you walk through the project, you walk through the user journeys, whatever it is that you've prepared, and you say, imagine it's a year from now, the CEOs in the front steps, the cameras are flashing, and the reporters are saying, why did this go so horribly, horribly wrong? Like, what are the things that are going to come up when they say that? And this is a really nice way both to bring everyone into the tent, but also to identify things which you never would have thought was a problem. Like maybe there's someone in IT, like an obscure IT department, who says, well, actually, if you join those two systems together, something will explode. So these are the things that are really useful and important. And it's just a little hack. If you take one thing away from today, maybe run more pre-mortems.
Great advice. Yes, I love that. It's a good idea. And the two pieces that I took away from that, Panos, are 100% alignment. It seems like, it's there's a thing that Dharmesh at HubSpot wrote about, like advice that he got from Elon Musk, where he talks about like every person inside of a company is a vector, and like if you're all pointed in different directions, you're pushing against each other, and like alignment is so important. And the cool thing is, what you're talking about is like when you have alignment, then you can add speed on top of that, and you can really get moving, right? And that's when things I think are fun. Like everybody loves that, when it's like things are just clicking and it's fun and you're moving fast. And another good point you made, which I love, is that like sometimes I think that people want to, if you're at a scaling tech company, for instance, there's always people who can come in with a lot of process or specific ways of doing things. And I think what you're saying is like the process is whatever works, right? Like you can have a process, but at the end of the day, if you're all trying to achieve the same goal, it doesn't matter exactly how you get it done. The process can be like having flexibility around your process, and having the process being however it works. And like if there's different teams that operate in slightly different ways, like that's okay. All right, we we have plenty of more questions. There's 4 people, so we could talk for a long more time. UX DX team, do we have any good audience questions that we want to toss in here? Let's see, don't see any in the chat.
Not at the moment, but we'll if anybody has any questions, put them in and we'll get them over to the team.
All right, now's your time, listeners. Put your questions in if you've got any good questions. This panel is really interesting to me because it is achieving what I was kind of hoping. We just have lots of different perspectives around different folks. So, all right, let's go a little rapid fire here. Now that we're coming to a close, what's something that you guys have all been in product-led organizations, you believe in product-led, you're doing this, you're living this. What's something you had to learn the hard way? You know, what is something that you, like a mistake that you made that listeners can figure out? They don't have to make that same mistake. Since Jana, we could start with you if you're ready. Like, what's something you had to learn the hard way or a mistake you made that people will benefit from?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I have like 2 examples, but the first one is not that from mistake, but maybe throughout the experience you just get to kind of understand this and start, you know, kind of really realizing that your users are not just focusing on functional aspects of your product, but they're also like focusing on emotional and social, like how they're going to be perceived, you know, like when they use your product, or how they're going to feel or they don't want to feel with your product. And that was really important aspect for me to realize and always keep in mind, because your users are coming with use case in mind, you know, and you really want to kind of help them to achieve their desired outcome, isn't it? So I just love the example of if you're kind of building I'm advising a B2B startups as well. So I just love to say to them, like, if you have like a live chat and you're building a live chat, what you can say to users is that you're basically building a web or mobile support tool, right? But on the other side, like you can also position it that it's actually a way for your customer to improve their customer acquisition. So, and that's shift, you know, and that's actually a big realization for me, and just keeping this always in the back of my head. The second example, and this is like from from really painful experience, is that you kind of as a startup you really juggle lots of balls in the air at the same time. You know, kind of you really need to kind of to think about the product, about marketing, how you're going to place it, and your messaging and positioning, and you just don't want to leave your onboarding for the end. So you kind of, if you only focus on your features at first and leave the onboarding, which essentially in product-led, and like in our case was the, you know, the major basically acquisition model is, if they like the product, they're going to sign up, they're going to kind of keep using it. So you really don't want to leave as an afterthought. You really want to have to look into what you need to do to kind of tick the boxes for the educational side for your product, but also like, you know, what you need to do in the product to make them feel welcome and say hello, like welcome emails, tool tips, you know, like all that stuff to kind of point them, product tours, like whatever, just to help them out, whatever the use case is in their mind, help them out to achieve that in the shortest time as possible. So
yeah, I love that. And I think it's I love engineers, no offense to engineering, we should have had an engineer in this panel, but when engineers are the only ones who can solve these problems, I think sometimes they become, you know, they look at it through that lens of like, okay, this is the functional job that the product needs to solve, and they're thinking less about like, you know, how does this make the user feel, or like, can we build in a moment of delight here, or like, what if we onboard people in this way, like, are people going to understand this? Can we add in a tooltip that just like, you know, is written in, you know, some fun language that makes them feel like they're included, or, you know, whatever it is. Yeah. And I think that is a huge element of a good user experience and like a great product experience, great customer experience. So that's a great point.
Two great things on that in short. So one is empty states. you really have the possibility like to make it fun, you know, like if everything is empty, you also like loading screens, you can make them fun as well. They can be a place of delight. So yeah.
Totally. Right. Yeah, and like B2B software can be fun too. It doesn't have to be like you know, it doesn't have to be boring and gray. It can be like you can do stuff with funny things with loading screens. So Panos, how about you? Anything that you learned the hard way that you want to share with folks?
No, I was thinking mainly, well, I guess that's a typical example is sometimes you build features that are not adapted, right? Or they were not very well thought to their core. So, and that's why I started with, if you don't measure it, you don't love it. As well, you have to have evidence for what you like to build, right? On maybe even you had some user discussions like to gather requirements or to understand the problem better. But even though there is a lot of bias in the stories of the users, right? So you really need some extra backup like data from wherever you can find that can help you really make a coherent story. So maybe to scrutinize more of my stories, that just qualitative input may not be enough sometimes. Look for more evidence.
Yes, no, it's a great, and you need both. You need qualitative and you need quantitative input. But I think for the most part, a lot of product teams still rely on gut feel and kind of intuition. And like that can get you started when you're a small company, right? Like you can make some good guesses and if you're a good PM or, you know, but I think at any amount of scale or like size of growth, right? You got to layer in data, you got to become more data driven. And not just in choosing the right features, but also in like, you know, design and growth and like all of that. So, all right, Robbie, how about you? Anything you learned the hard way that you can share with people?
I think, I mean, it's an obvious point, but one that we should always remind ourselves of, which is just make things as easy and delightful if you can as possible for your customers. And this is, you know, absolutely, we've made this great forecasting for your cash flow. It's pioneering in the market. It's a new category. It's a very exciting tool for accountants and SMEs, but you know, it takes a little bit of work to set up. And so if you focus too much on that habit moment, which is kind of at the very end of, hey, you should be using this to have monthly discussions with your clients or a monthly check-in on your cash flow, and you forget the aha moment, like, oh, I see the value, and all those little setup moments, kind of to the earlier point as well, then you're going to get in real trouble. So don't just think about that kind of end of the line aspect of, wow, we created this new thing that people will just use because it's so amazing. Think about your customer, how easy is it, how delightful is it, and think about that setup and aha moment, which is that moment of delight, that moment of value that people see, and then how that leads to the habit moment. I think if you can always remember that, then you'll be a better place.
I love that. And like, that's the right conversation for the, you know, product teams and I mean, growth teams and everybody to start having around product-led organizations. It's not just, yeah, we're going to build the right stuff, but also like, how can we get people, how can we increase time to value? Like, how can we make sure that the product is sticky, that people are coming back, you know, that they're doing the things that we want them to, we're measuring the things and we understand what brings value, and then how can we push more people to do it. That's when things get really, really interesting. And like, yeah, I love the, we have this thing called core events at Pendo. And so we're talking to our PMs a lot about it. And it's like trying to understand in every product, like what are there's lots of things you can measure, but like, what are the really important aha moments or things that we know we want people to do? Because that is either a sign that they're getting a lot of value out of it or that they're successful with it, or, you know, so I think it's starting to think like that is real smart, folks. We have a question for, I think this is a good one for you, Jose, but like, it's a question coming from the audience, but tell us about how do you, building a feedback culture, how do you encourage your teams to go for that? Like anything you can do, influence or bring to the company that helps build that culture of feedback?
Wow, it's kind of like the million-dollar question, right? And one of the questions that we are continue learning on that. It's so funny because one thing that I can share as a learning is that everybody talks nowadays about feedback, but how many people has been formally trained into what good feedback looks like? It's very unlikely that our generation has got to learn that in college, or or so you can either just read books on that, or you read blogs. I mean, it's a word right now that has a lot to unpack, right? But not everyone understands what good feedback looks like, and even something that is very sensitive, whether feedback should be private or made public to the organization, right? And whether feedback is about how am I doing, or how am I doing against the expectations of the project, right? So feedback has so many layers. There's a lot of academic research that has been done, but I would challenge if anyone has the right answer right now to say how this looks like in a corporate environment or in an organizational environment, right? So things that we are doing at ThoughtWorks is precisely doing that research. We have academic knowledge on that. There's a lot of papers that have been written on how good feedback looks like. And even more important, once you are provided with feedback, what do you do with that feedback, right? Should I take it all? Should I accept it partially? Should I just say no and feel confident that I should not do that? So we have been doing a lot of research, and then also asking ourselves the question of what is our vision, or our ThoughtWorks vision for feedback, right? What's that in our DNA? What's the vision? How has it worked before? One thing is for sure, and we hear from a lot of employees, and that's actually one of the main reasons why sometimes people decide to leave, right? To be totally honest, is that people feel like they don't get enough feedback, or the feedback that they get it's trying to be so politically correct and so in the safe space that doesn't bring them value, right? And sometimes feedback comes from people that they don't work on their day-to-day. So how do you improve that? It's definitely about role modeling, about pedagogy, about showing examples. We do a lot of role play on that inside of the organization as well. For two people trying to do, I'm that person and you are that person, and I'm going to provide you feedback based on that fictional scenario, right? Because we don't want to bring people into their day-to-day case and being exposed, right? But then a very interesting question is that how can a digital product canalize feedback that is internal for an organization, and how much of that feedback should operational folks be able to consume in order to understand how is this person doing against expectations in the organization. So basically, I don't have a definitive answer. We are learning a lot from that. I hope that I can share more in the future, but definitely.
I have a little hack. Sorry, I have lots of hacks. My background is in behavioral science, which is if you want to get, and doesn't answer any of your structural problems of feedback, which I totally agree with Jose, but if you as an individual want to get more constructive feedback from people, just change one thing about how you ask the question, which is instead of asking for feedback, ask for advice. What advice would you give me? And that is a very different word, and it gives you much more constructive feedback over time. So try it out.
I love that. And I think the point you make around, I mean, feedback is a gift for sure. And I think it's important, but we talk about it that way. And we talk less about like, oh, what is like the details of it, right? Because you can get bad feedback. Not all feedback is good. Like you can have very meaningless feedback that you get and that you shouldn't take, right? To answer, like to get into your certain question. So taking the time, like giving good feedback is a skill too, I think. And like, you have to be able to really understand, the person and what they're doing in the project before you can give good feedback. If you just kind of fly in and you see something and you don't like it and you say that you don't like it, you're not helping anybody really. So I love it. Good feedback, especially with like creatives, like if it's a designer or somebody's writing, like feedback could be, offend them or be hard to take or whatever. And like on my own writing, it's been hard for me to take some feedback, but also like when you get really good feedback, it can really make something that was good great. So it's like a lot of good points in there. We are, I think, over time now, but I just want to thank you guys all. This is really, really fun for me. I feel like I learned a lot. So Jose, Panos, Robbie, Snezana, nice to meet you guys. And thank you so much for making some time.